Alrighty, friends, welcome to the very first Ask Me Anything episode of The Proof. We're 300 plus episodes into the show now, and this is really the first opportunity for the community for you guys to submit questions to me, which you've done over Instagram and Twitter and some on email. So thank you very much for everyone that did that. There is literally, 300 or 400 questions came in over the last week or so. And so we have enough questions for many of these episodes. This is the first opportunity where we can answer questions almost in real time that are a little bit more personalized, individualized often to your own circumstances. Or perhaps you've been listening to episodes and we've covered certain things and you've wanted a little bit more information, you wanted to double click on something, or perhaps there's something that we just have never covered and you'd like to hear my opinion on that. So I'm hoping that these conversations can be quite conversational. I have the questions out in front of me, but I haven't really planned the answers so much. So whatever comes to mind is what I will share with you. And of course, if I'm unsure of something, I will always put my hand up and say, I don't know. I think we need to repopularize that phrase, I don't know. So sit down on your couch. This can be a conversation that kind of feels like we would be on the couch together, or it could be us going for a walk. So pop your runners on and head out for a walk, get the heart rate up. Maybe if you're feeling really inspired, put a backpack with a bit of weight and get that heart rate up, get sweaty. Okay, let's get into it. So I have 20 plus questions today that my team has given me. It's a mix of questions related to nutrition and exercise and some personal questions in here that are quite amusing. There's a question in here about dad jokes. I don't tell dad jokes that often, but when I do, he laughs. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into it. First question is from Jared. So Jared says, I'm a new father. Congratulations. I work full-time and have noticed my diet and fitness has started to slide. I'm finding it hard to fit everything in and feeling more stressed. If I was to focus on a few things as a starting point with limited time, what would they be? So firstly, just to reiterate that, congratulations. This must be a very exciting time in your life. Let's focus on the start of your question here. You said you're working full-time. You said you've noticed that your diet and fitness has started to slide. You're a new father. I would say that this is very common. You're trying to juggle being a good employee, you're trying to be productive at work, you're trying to be a good partner, you're trying to be a good father, perhaps for the first time. And on top of that, you're trying to stay healthy. So this is not an easy feat. It's a challenge, and it sounds like it's a challenge that you're up for because you are at least aware of this and you're wanting to make some improvements, some steps towards greater health. And so what I would say is we need to think about what are the biggest levers and what will be most impactful with the least amount of time. So you can have more time to help your partner, to attend to your new daughter or son, and to be productive at work. And on top of all of that, all of your regular daily life admin and seeing friends and family and these sorts of things. So I would break it down into kind of three main things to focus on. Firstly, if we think about nutrition, let's just keep it very, very simple. Aim to get 30 grams of fiber in your diet per day. And you can use an app to see where you're landing. But really the only way to get to 30 grams is to make sure you're eating enough fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And if there was one thing to focus on in the typical diet right now that is letting people down, it is fiber. And as soon as you generally, when you get someone's fiber up to 30 grams, providing that they're not doing that just with a supplement, you are really improving their diet quality, which is going to have big effects on their physiology and their risk of disease, cardiometabolic disease in particular. But it's also going to affect your energy levels, your ability to recover. And so it's going to provide some immediate benefits as well. The second thing that I would get you to focus on, which again is related to nutrition, is aiming to get 30 grams of protein per meal. And this could be from a mix of protein sources. But what I would say is that, and I don't know where your diet's at right now, but if I'm assuming that you're following a kind of typical omnivorous diet, most people are getting 70-80% of their protein from animal protein. And that's great from a recovery and a training adaptation point of view, getting the adaptations we're looking for in skeletal muscle after you do resistance training and cardio. But it's not as good for you in terms of your long-term disease risk, particularly, again, cardiometabolic diseases, but also various types of cancer. So if you can lean a little bit more into plant proteins, tofu, tempeh, lentils, chickpeas, beans, a good plant-based protein powder. I use Momentous, who are a sponsor of this show. This is not a paid integration right here. I love their product. If you're based in America, check them out. But I would be leaning more into plant protein so that you're getting at least 50% of your protein from those plant-based sources, and then 50% from animal if you are eating that omnivorous diet. And even then, with the animal protein, I would be favoring animal foods like fatty fish, Greek yogurt, and eggs over red meat and even white meat. It's not to say that you can't have red meat and white meat in your diet, but I would be de-emphasizing those in favor of, again, fatty fish, Greek yogurt, eggs, tofu, tempeh, lentils, black beans, chickpeas, etc. So that's two. So first was getting 30 grams of fiber per day. Second is 30 grams of protein per meal. And you might be having 3 or 4 meals a day. And then the fourth is exercise. And this is where we need to be really smart, because exercise can take quite a lot of time investment. And so if you're short on time, we need to be very, very strategic with the type of exercise we're choosing. So I would be doing 2 45-minute resistance training sessions a week. And I actually have a friend who I have put on a similar plan recently, who said to me, I have 2 days a week to train. You know, I can be moderately active outside of that, but I have 2 days a week to go to the gym. So I would have 2 45-minute resistance training sessions where you're doing full body. And you can put those, they can be any day of the week, just make sure you have 1 day between them to recover. After the 45 minutes of a full body resistance training, we're going to go straight into HIIT, high intensity interval training. And what that would look like is, it could be on a treadmill, it could be on a stationary bike, it could be rowing. Let's say, for example, that you can use a treadmill and you can jog and run. You'll get straight after resistance training, you're going to go to the treadmill and do 5 minutes warming up. And what's a warm up? Well, I want you to select a pace that is about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. The simple way of knowing that you're in that kind of territory is, let's say it's a slow jog, you're still able to speak, but you feel a bit puffy, you're a little bit sweaty. You're certainly starting to feel a little bit hot, but you're not at the point where you're like huffing and puffing and couldn't carry out a conversation with someone. So 5 minute warm up. Now this is where things get fun. Remember, you're time poor, so I'm trying to fit quite a bit in, and I'm trying to pick things that will deliver you the biggest bang for their buck in terms of time invested. After you warm up for 5 minutes, you're going to move to 1 minute intervals. 1 minute on, essentially running the fastest speed you can run that you can maintain for a minute. So in terms of treadmill speed, depending on your level of fitness, that could be at 11 kilometers an hour, it could be at 12 kilometers an hour, it could be at 15 kilometers an hour. You're going to maintain that for a minute, and then you have a minute of active rest. So back the speed off, and I would back it off to a fast walk. So you'd be backing off to like 6 kilometers per hour. If you're American and you measure in yards or miles, you can do the conversion for me. So a minute as fast as you can run, and then a minute of active rest at 5-6 kilometers an hour. And you're going to then repeat that another 4 times. So you end up doing 5 minutes of active work, running as fast as you can for a minute within each period. Now, you're going to do that twice a week because it's going to be at the end of each of your resistance training workouts, which means across a week, you're getting 10 minutes of this high intensity work. I'd like to see you over time increase that based on your fitness and based on the time that you have. If you can increase the duration of your workouts a little bit, I would stick to the 2 45-minute resistance training sessions, but I would build those intervals up so that rather than doing 5 intervals at the end of each session, you work your way up to 10, which would be 10 1-minute efforts at the end of each of those resistance training workouts. Again, a 1-minute effort is followed by 1 minute of active rest. And then all of a sudden now you have a program where you're doing resistance training twice a week and you're getting 20 minutes of this high intensity effort in where your heart rate's going to be at 80% plus maximum heart rate. And around that, prioritize movement where you can, whether it's walking with your family or hiking, or if you get the opportunity socially to play tennis or play padel, whatever you can fit in. But just know that you already ticked off 2 of the largest boxes in resistance training and high intensity work with those 2 workouts that you've done. And I think that's a great program for someone that's relatively time crunched and feel good about what you're doing, and then go and invest time in family and creating memories and building relationships and all of those sorts of things. So hopefully that's helpful. That's what I would do if I was really time crunched. It would be a 2-day-a-week program, and I would structure it exactly like that, where I'm prioritizing lifting weights, resistance training, and high intensity work. Some people might say the weakness of that program is it doesn't have moderate intensity sustained cardio. That's true, but that is also very time consuming. So I think when you're time crunched, you get more out of the high intensity work if you can do that. Okay, Jared, thank you very much for that question. Next question is from Zach. What are your thoughts on methylene blue? Oh, this is a good one. I have quite a few thoughts actually. So the first that comes to mind before we get into any of the evidence that's looking at methylene blue or has looked at methylene blue and how it might affect human health, I just want to comment on logical inconsistency. So something that I've found, I'm not sure if amusing is the right word, perhaps ironic is better, is that many of the wellness influencers that are seemingly promoting methylene blue now are the same people who I've seen previously take certain positions about other foods that where something is not natural, it must not be good. Natural is good, and if it's synthetic or artificial, it must be bad. That actually falls under what's called the naturalistic fallacy or appeal to nature. And it's certainly not something that I agree with. I think there are many examples where natural products like tobacco and cannabis, cocaine, certainly at certain exposure levels, are deleterious, arsenic, heavy metals, the list kind of goes on. And then there are examples of things that are not natural, that are man-made, that can be beneficial. And we could list countless examples. One that comes to mind is insulin for people with type 1 diabetes. That is synthetic. It's manufactured by humans, but it's absolutely life-saving for people with type 1 diabetes. Without it, they would die. So I don't buy into the naturalistic fallacy, but I find it somewhat ironic that there are people who use that line of thinking. For example, say, seed oils, they're not just found in nature. They are produced and manufactured by humans. That's true. And I've seen people say, well, and that is why they are not fit for human consumption. These things are not natural, therefore they're bad. Yet they're the same people often that are now promoting methylene blue. And methylene blue is certainly not natural. Methylene blue was, I believe, first produced in the late 1800s within the textile industry as a fabric dye, a blue fabric dye. And then later and I'm not sure exactly how, but people started studying it and looking at how it might affect human health. So pushing that kind of logical inconsistency to the side, what do I think about methylene blue? Well, there is some interesting research looking at methylene blue, particularly from a mechanistic point of view. And what we understand is that methylene blue does affect mitochondrial function. It seems to affect the ability of mitochondria, which reside within our cells, to produce energy, to produce ATP, and it also appears to have some antioxidant function. But the human studies and the animal studies that have been performed are relatively small in terms of the number of subjects in these studies. They're typically very, very short studies. There are a few human studies that have gone for a year or longer in very specific populations. But whether this has any type of efficacy and safety in healthy adults, which seems to be who it's being marketed to, I can't really say, because there doesn't seem to be any studies, clinical studies, interventions going over weeks or months in healthy adults looking at whether the supplementation of methylene blue versus a placebo has any effect on certain outcomes. So unlike something like creatine, it's not really something that I could recommend today, because I can't tell you what the benefits are that are up for grabs, and I can't tell you what the clear risks are, and I can't tell you what dose I would be recommending to maximize benefit and reduce the chance of side effects. So I think from a mechanistic point of view, it's interesting and maybe a space to watch. But unless you're a biohacker that is kind of willing to take on a lot of risk, I'm not sure that it's something that I'd put into your supplement stack just yet. Next question from Steph. What's the biggest nutrition myth that people still believe in 2025? Two come to mind. One is that carbohydrates are inherently fattening, which is not true. There's an abundance of research comparing high-quality low-carb diets to high-quality high-carb diets, and one is not particularly fattening. We understand that whether someone is going to gain weight comes back to the overall energy balance, how much total energy they're consuming versus expending. And you can gain weight on a low carb diet and you can gain weight on a high carb diet if you're eating in excess of the calories, the amount of energy that your body needs. And secondly, I would say, and this might be a bigger myth, is that plant proteins are missing essential amino acids. The confusion here is, I think, around the definition of an incomplete protein. So it is true that certain plant-based proteins are incomplete, but I think people are conflating that with these proteins are missing one or more of the 9 essential amino acids, which is not true. All plants contain all 9 essential amino acids. In fact, these essential amino acids initially originate from plants. What is true, again, is that certain plants are an incomplete source of protein. And what that means is that they're not missing an essential amino acid. It just means that if you were to eat that single food for all of your calories, you would fall short in your requirements for one or more of the 9 essential amino acids for that day. Now, that could be relevant for populations where there is food insecurity and people are living off one or two foods. But where you're in a food environment where you're eating with just modest diversity and you're getting enough total protein throughout the day, something in the order of 1.2 grams per kilogram or higher, I think is a good kind of level to aim for, then you have nothing to worry about. You're getting all of the 9 essential amino acids that you need, whether you're getting all of your protein from plants, getting it from a mix of animal and plants, or just from animal foods. And you can put that into Chronometer, an app that you'll find on the Apple store, and you can see a breakdown of your essential amino acid intake. And I challenge anyone to eat enough total protein with just a very modest mix of foods and show me that you fall short on any of the 9 essential amino acids. Recently, I've stopped having coffee after 10 a.m. and let me tell you, this has been an absolute game changer. Those extra cups or two in the late morning or early afternoon were undeniably messing with my sleep, leaving me wired when I didn't want to be, and throwing off my focus the following day. Now my days are powered by Peak's organic Nandaka adaptogenic coffee alternative. With functional mushrooms and pu-erh tea, each creamy spiced cacao cup of Nandaka helps me stay calm yet focused and clear-headed, minus the jitters, so I can fully commit to my tasks without feeling distracted. As an added bonus, Nandaka also satisfies my sweet tooth, so my mindless snacking on dark chocolate, yes, that is one of my vices, has gone down considerably, and I'm sleeping better than ever. If you're ready to transform your days with better energy and productivity, try Nandaka today. Right now, you can get 20% off plus a free starter kit when you shop exclusively at peaklifecom/Simon. That's PIQUE life.com/Simon. Okay, next up is a question from Stacy. Stacy says, if plant-based eaters are so healthy, why do some still struggle with high cholesterol? So there are a few possible reasons why someone who's eating a plant-based diet may still have high cholesterol. The first and obvious one is genetics. So some people have genetic alleles or variants that determine their cholesterol levels or lead to elevated cholesterol levels irrespective of their lifestyle. In that circumstance, if someone is working with their doctor and they have elevated LDL cholesterol or ApoB and they're considered to be at risk of cardiovascular disease, then they're going to want to work with their doctor to look at medicines that will lower LDL cholesterol /ApoB. Fortunately, today there's a wide variety of these medicines that do that with good effect, from statins to bempedoic acid to PCSK9 inhibitors and ezetimibe. So that's one reason, genetics. The second reason could be life stage, and what comes to mind here is menopause. So we know that as a woman goes through menopause and estrogen declines, quite literally falls off a cliff, that often you see estrogen going down and you see LDL cholesterol going up, and this might explain why postmenopausal women have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, one of the reasons. And it's thought that estrogen actually plays a very important role in helping maintain LDL cholesterol levels. And so when estrogen levels decline after menopause, there's this kind of inverse relationship with LDL cholesterol where it swings the other way. And in fact, estrogen therapy has been shown, at least in some studies that I've seen, to help lower LDL cholesterol. This is another possible example of someone who's eating a plant-based diet. They go through menopause, their LDL cholesterol goes up. A good reason to pay extra close attention to your diet during that period, which would mean monitoring the types of fat you're eating, trying to eat more monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, which means less kind of red meat and butter and more olive oil and nuts and seeds and tofu and even fatty fish if someone did eat seafood, and increasing your fiber intake, potentially looking at certain supplements like psyllium husk. Actually, I think there's a question later that we might speak about psyllium husk. Doing all of those nutritional things as you're going through menopause become even more important to try and keep LDL cholesterol down. But then also working with your doctor during that period to discuss things like hormone replacement therapy, so estrogen replacement therapy, plus or minus some type of lipid lowering drug if it's indicated, if LDL cholesterol increases to a point that you can't optimize it with lifestyle. So that's two. And then the third would be, it's possible to consume a plant-based diet and still be eating or consuming a lot of saturated fats, particularly if you're cooking regularly with coconut oil or palm oil, or you're eating a lot of ultra processed foods that contain those ingredients. So that could be another reason why someone is eating a plant-based diet and has high LDL cholesterol. And in fact, let's use this as a segue to the next question that came from Mark. And again, Stacey, thank you so much for that question. That was a great question. Mark says, if someone wanted to lower their ApoB and improve heart health, but didn't want to take a statin, what's the best alternative? Okay, there's a bit in this. Firstly, I would want to have a discussion with Mark around why he didn't want to take a statin. And in fact, I would refer him to have that discussion with a cardiologist. So I just want that discussion to take place. But maybe he had tried a statin and had some adverse effects and is looking for another solution. So he says, what's the best alternative? Well, again, as I just mentioned, we're really fortunate today in 2025, and people that have listened to my episodes with Thomas Dayspring, Dr. Thomas Dayspring, will know that there are many different options at our hands to lower ApoB. And I just mentioned them before. So in addition to statins, and even within statins, there's high intensity and low intensity, and often people do much better on a low intensity statin. Bempedoic acid, PCSK9 inhibitors, ezetimibe, these are all other alternatives for people to consider if they're not tolerating statins. And so that's a discussion to have with your primary practitioner, physician, cardiologist. But let's say that Mark didn't want to take medications at all. What can he do with his lifestyle? Well, the biggest lever that he can pull is with his nutrition. And this is where I would point people to the dietary portfolio, which was kind of originally devised by Dr. David Jenkins, who's been on the show, and then many of his colleagues like Dr. Andrea Glenn, who's also been on the show, have done a lot of research on this dietary pattern, looking at how it affects cardiometabolic health and markers like LDL cholesterol and ApoB. So on screen for those watching, I'm showing the portfolio diet, and there's this kind of really nice PDF, it'll be in the show notes as well, that breaks down 4 different things you can do with your nutrition that altogether total to about a 30% reduction in your LDL cholesterol. And that's a fairly large magnitude of LDL cholesterol reduction, similar to a low intensity statin, in fact. So what are these 4 components? And what I love about this is you focus on what you're adding to the diet. It's not focusing on what you're removing. But by virtue of focusing on these 4 things, it means you're going to eat less of other things. So number 1 is nuts. Eating 45 grams of nuts per day. Just a couple of two small handfuls of nuts. And how does that affect LDL cholesterol? Well, nuts contain fiber, which lowers LDL cholesterol, and they also contain these unsaturated fats that also lower LDL cholesterol through a different mechanism by increasing the number of LDL receptors on the liver, which helps clear more LDL cholesterol out of the blood. So number 1 is nuts, 45 grams a day. Number 2 is plant protein, 50 grams per day. And this includes, soy foods like tempeh and tofu, but also lentils and peas and chickpeas and beans. And there are a few different mechanisms at play here as to how this affects LDL cholesterol. The big ones are when you're consuming these sources of plant protein, your saturated fat consumption is naturally going to go down. Your fiber consumption is going to go up. Your phytosterol, which are these plant compounds, goes up, which help lower LDL cholesterol. So the net effect of aiming for 50 grams of plant protein per day, again, is this reduction in LDL cholesterol. Third recommendation within the portfolio diet is a focus on viscous or sticky fiber. And in short, really this is about eating enough fruits and vegetables throughout the day, sticking to whole, unrefined versions of bread and oats where possible, and again, eating foods like beans and lentils and chickpeas. All of these foods contain this viscous fiber, which really helps bind up bile in the gut, and bile is made of cholesterol. When you bind up bile and it gets carried through the body and excreted, what happens is the liver says, hey, we need more bile. Typically, the liver is reabsorbing bile from the gut back into the liver. But when it can't reabsorb as much of this bile, and I don't want to go into too much of a physiology lesson here, but bile is important for absorbing fats in digestion. When the liver can't reabsorb as much back from the gut, it has to produce more. And to produce more, it requires more cholesterol. And so what happens is it upregulates that LDL receptor. Again, similar mechanism to what I spoke about earlier. More of this LDL cholesterol is pulled into the liver to make the bile. And in doing that, you lower LDL cholesterol in circulation. So that's the benefit of eating fiber, particularly this viscous or sticky fiber. And in fact, a quick hack, not to replace eating fruits and vegetables, but bonus points, is to go and get a psyllium husk supplement and have 10 grams of psyllium husk per day. And you can add that into your smoothie. And that has been shown to lower ApoB by about 5 milligrams per deciliter, which is a pretty significant reduction. And when you stack it with all of these other things, that's how you get to this kind of 30% reduction in LDL cholesterol. So the first three parts of the portfolio diet we've spoken about: nuts, plant protein, viscous fiber. And the fourth is plant sterols, 2 grams per day. This is one where I, based on my conversations with Thomas Dayspring, have a few kind of mixed feelings. Plant sterols are these kind of cholesterol-like compounds that are found in plant foods. And they block the reabsorption of cholesterol in the gut, or the absorption of cholesterol in the gut, which helps lower LDL cholesterol. We know that. We have evidence to show that when you supplement with plant sterols, these phytosterols, you get a reduction in LDL cholesterol. We don't have evidence that spans over 5 or 10 years to show that definitively lowers the risk of cardiovascular events. We can speculate, but we don't know that. And there is some concern that plant sterols, even though they block this cholesterol absorption in the gut, they can be absorbed themselves, and they could be atherogenic. We don't really understand that until we have these longer term studies looking at cardiovascular disease outcomes with plant sterol supplementation versus a placebo. And this is where plant stanols get interesting, because underneath this kind of phytosterol banner, these compounds in plants that block cholesterol absorption, there are plant sterols and plant stanols. And while both block cholesterol absorption, plant sterols get absorbed into our blood. The effect that they have on our arteries and heart, a little bit unknown. Whereas plant stanols are almost exclusively blocking cholesterol, but not being absorbed into circulation. Only a very, very tiny percentage are actually absorbed into circulation. So that is why it is Dr. Thomas Dayspring's recommendation to, if you're going to supplement with plant sterols, to find plant stanols, which is what brands like Benecol, no affiliation with this show, are using in their products, in their margarine and other products that they sell. So if you're going to add plant sterols, 2 grams a day is the recommendation in supplement form. That'll give you an extra 5 to 10% reduction in your LDL cholesterol. If you can, opt for a plant stanol version. And that rounds out the portfolio diet. So Mark, if you're not wanting to take lipid-lowering medications, then check out the link in the show notes for the portfolio diet. Follow these 4 recommendations, and you could expect to see an approximately 30% reduction in your LDL cholesterol, depending on your baseline LDL cholesterol level. Okay, next question. Jose, what's one health habit you struggle with despite knowing all the science? Well, firstly, I would say that I think generally people have this idea that I do everything I speak about perfectly, which is not the case. My motto is to be consistently imperfect rather than occasionally perfect. So everything that I talk about with you guys, be it nutrition, be it exercise, be it sleep, I am doing imperfectly. I am flawed just like every other human. If I was going to isolate one health habit that's kind of top of mind that I think I find the hardest, it's eating late at night right up to bed, and eating more of my calories in the back half of the day closer to dinner, closer to bedtime rather than earlier in the day. So for whatever reason, I find it very easy to wake up. I don't really feel that hungry when I wake up. I find it easy to kind of go through often till midday without eating, without even thinking about it. But for whatever reason, I am usually very hungry at dinner time. Typically, that's when I have most of my calories, and I am a sucker for dark chocolate before bed. So if there was one health habit that I'm struggling with, that's it. But again, I'm not beating myself up about it too much. Okay, Lauren asks, are refined carb sources like pasta and white rice okay to eat? I think this is such a great question. I'm going to probably get into a little bit of trouble here with the purists. I do think over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been this conflation of putting foods like pasta and white rice, these quote unquote kind of refined carbs, and I could be guilty of this at some point, in the same bucket as ultra processed hyper palatable foods that contain added sugars or refined starches. But these are very different foods in terms of how they affect hunger, how they affect appetite, satiety, calorie intake. And that's one of the main mechanisms by which ultra-processed hyperpalatable foods are driving increased risk of disease. It's that they're providing a lot of calories per bite, so they're very energy dense. They're not satiating, and they're kind of hijacking these satiety mechanisms that we have, these inbuilt satiety mechanisms that typically when we're eating more whole foods, less calories per bite, are preventing us from over-consuming calories and gaining weight. And so I think there is a lot of confusion here where people are putting, pasta and white rice into the same bucket as, cookies and cakes and pastries, all these ultra processed packaged foods that not only have refined carbohydrates, be it sugar or starch, but refined oils and fats, artificial ingredients, lots of sodium. They don't have a lot of fiber. They don't have a lot of protein. They don't have a lot of water. So it's this package that altogether makes it very easy to overconsume calories, makes them very hyperpalatable. It's hard to sort of just isolate and say the fat that's in there is the problem in any form, because the fat that's in ultra processed foods, linoleic acid, is also in nuts and seeds, right? And just in the same way that the carbohydrates, be it the starch or the sugars that are added into the ultra processed foods, they're also found in fruits and in beans and legumes. So I think we have to come back to the data. And when you look at carbohydrates overall, and you look at more isolated forms of carbohydrates like sugar or pasta or white rice, these foods do not seem to be deleterious or damaging to human health unless they are contributing to an excessive calorie intake. So if you're someone who's metabolically healthy, you are not consuming excessive calories, and your overall dietary pattern is providing sufficient nutrition, then there's no reason why you can't have white pasta and white rice, and even put a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee. I mean, we've got to this point where it's like, God forbid we have any white sugar. It's poison. That's not true. A teaspoon of white sugar is like 16 calories. You're metabolically healthy. Your body knows what to do with those carbohydrates. They're not just inherently damaging. I say within the context of a diet that's nutritionally adequate, because the one downside of getting a lot of calories from white pasta or white rice, or adding a lot of refined sugar to your diet, is that other than the calories, there's not a lot of other nutrition coming along for the ride. You're not getting a lot of vitamins and minerals or fiber, but providing you're getting the vitamins and the minerals and the fiber from the rest of your diet, then you can include these foods into your dietary pattern and not feel guilty or shamed. And you only have to look as far as some of the Mediterranean diets or the Japanese diet to see that pasta and white rice can feature within a healthy dietary pattern. So again, I'm I'm probably annoying the purists here, but I do think that we have arrived in a time and place where orthorexia, this kind of over focus on the purity of our diet and the cleanliness of our diet, we've arrived where orthorexia is probably at all-time highs. And I would just like people to kind of understand what the data is showing here, that you don't have to look at these foods like pasta, white rice, and even sugar as inherently toxic. Again, if you're metabolically healthy, your body knows what to do with glucose, with carbohydrates. And the next question was from Bella, which I've just answered, but is sugar really as bad as people say, or is it just another nutrition scapegoat? So again, the context matters. What is your dietary pattern, and how are you consuming that sugar? Because clearly sugar in fruit is not something that people should be concerned with. We know that people who eat more fruit are healthier. Again, as I said, if you put a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee and you're someone who's a healthy body weight, you're exercising regularly, metabolically healthy, that's not something to fear. What I would say is within the ultra-processed food category, probably the clearest example of a food with a lot of sugar in it that we know is associated with obesity and overweight and poor metabolic health is sugar-sweetened beverages. So the Coca-Cola and Sprites and Fantas of the world, and I think everyone kind of understands this. That's a food group that I would be just trying to steer clear of altogether, because you're consuming a lot of calories in a very short period of time. It makes it very easy to overconsume calories when you're consuming sugar sweetened beverages. So Lauren and Bella, thank you for those questions on refined carbs. Rob says, what's a wellness trend you see blowing up in the next 5 years? I would say personalized nutrition. And this also kind of speaks to another question that came through from Kareem, who asked about Zoe and personalized nutrition. And again, no affiliation with this show. I've had Tim Spector on the show, who is one of the founders of Zoe, but they're not a sponsor. And I'm not obliged to speak about Zoe in any particular way. I think personalized nutrition is going to become a trend. It already is. There's a number of companies playing in this space. And I would say that of all the companies playing in this space, at least the ones that I've come across, I think Zoe is doing the best job at trying to substantiate their product with science. And they've done a number of different studies, but the one that kind of stands out to me looking at their program is a randomized controlled trial, which I believe was published last year, that compared going through their program, which in short is doing a microbiome test, wearing a continuous blood glucose monitor for a couple of weeks, and then receiving kind of quote unquote personalized dietary advice within an app and being able to log your food. It's a really nice, aesthetically pleasing program that is encouraging people essentially to eat more plants and fiber and healthier sources of fats overall. And they kind of promote this personalization aspect where they're using the information from the microbiome test and from the CGM results, which is combined with eating some muffins. I have done this myself a while back. They're using that information, and I suspect some sort of algorithm to then personalize the advice within the app, okay, which is a nice concept at a high level. And they compared it to a control group who were just given standard dietary guidance. I believe it was the USDA American kind of dietary guidelines. And I said that the results were somewhat unsurprising to me. And that's my position, because anytime you kind of hold someone's hand and put them, into an app and give them personalized information that they think is personalized, then they're likely to really buy into that and adhere to that in a way that I don't think someone would if they were just being given general cookie cutter advice and were not being told that it was personalized. So overall, the study that they conducted does show that there are some advantages to this Zoe program compared to a standard dietary advice kind of program. But it doesn't tease out the personalization aspect. I'm not sure that there is an independent effect of personalization. The only real way to test the independent effect of personalization, so Zoe's algorithm that gives personalized advice about foods based on your microbiome and based on your CGM results, would be to run a randomized controlled trial where both groups do the microbiome test, do the CGM. Both groups are told they're given a personalized diet within the Zoe app. But unbeknown, while one group is getting this personalized advice based on the algorithm, the other group is just getting general cookie cutter advice consistent with the dietary guidelines. And that type of study design would then give you more of an independent look at the personalization aspect of the Zoe program and would give me more confidence in their algorithm and the ability to personalize a diet, and that being beneficial over and above just getting people into an app and telling them that it's personalized. In short, I think that that's a wellness trend that's going to blow up, this idea of personalized nutrition. And hopefully the companies out there that are playing in this space, and the best ones out there who are taking the science seriously, are going to independently prove that the personalization aspect of whatever the program is that they're offering has an independent effect. If you're serious about optimizing your health, I've got something for you. 8 Sleep and their revolutionary Pod 4 Ultra. The Pod 4 Ultra is not just a mattress cover, it is an entire sleep system. With advanced temperature control and biometric tracking, the pod has helped me take my sleep and recovery to the next level. And as someone who is always looking to optimize health, better sleep means better everything. Focus, energy, workouts, and even better communication with my partner, Tawny. What makes the Pod 4 Ultra so incredible? Well, it learns your sleep patterns and adjusts the temperature automatically throughout the night, optimizing your body temperature during the 4 stages of sleep. If you're ready to take your sleep and recovery to the next level, head over to 8sleep.com/theproof and use the code THEPROOF to get $350 off your very own Pod 4 Ultra. The best part is that you still get 30 days to try it at home and return it if you don't like it, but I'm confident you'll keep it. Trust me, your body will thank you for this investment in better sleep. Shipping to many countries worldwide. See details at 8sleep.com/theproof. Okay, next question is from Natalie San. She says, have you ever pooped your pants? A question I ask all of my friends. I have to say, I didn't think we were going here. Of course, when I was 6 months or 3 months or 9 months or whatever it was, I was probably pooping my pants quite regularly. I'll have to ask my mum. But I assume you're asking me if I've pooped my pants as an adult. The answer to that is yes. So this is bringing back some memories that I've tried to forget. On my last day of my first visit to Bali, so this is back in 2013. So yes, I'm a full-blown adult by this time. On the very last day, I've checked out of my hotel. My flight is at about 11 p.m. Many of you have probably experienced this before. Spend the day, by the pool, in the lobby, at the beach. I started to get head spins and was feeling very sick. In fact, I was feeling that way before I checked out. And then as I was kind of checking out, making my way down to the pool, it was getting worse. And so I spent many hours by the pool, running into the lobby and using their bathroom. And yeah, I'll spare you the details, but it was coming out both ends. And it got into the afternoon. I thought that I'd been making, some steps towards recovery. I was feeling better. I was having coconut and some toast. And I thought I'd like to go and jump in the ocean. And I remember kind of the ocean there's a lot of sand. It's a long way from the resort to the actual water. And I got about 3/4 of the way and I knew I had to go. There was no stopping this. And again, I'll spare you the details, but I had to make the decision, run 3/4 of the way back to the hotel or just run into the ocean. Into the ocean it was. And I'm pretty sure there was some evacuation happening on the way in. So I spared myself the embarrassment of that happening back at the hotel though. So I felt like I made the right choice at the time. Anyway, you can let me know in the comments. Okay, next question is from Kelly, who says, what is a Bogan? Clearly we've moved on to the lighter questions. So a Bogan is Australian slang. And it's a it can be used as a kind of derogatory term to describe someone who presents themselves, whether it's through the way they dress or the way they act or speak, in an unsophisticated way. But it can also be used as a term kind of in jest, with banter with your mates, or in a self-deprecating way as well. So typically not a word that you would want to use to describe someone that you don't know. It can be quite an insult. So yeah, that's what a bogan is. Next up, Rachel says, Dr. Patrick states we should be taking 2 grams of omega-3s per day. Thoughts? So I would go back to the episode that I did with Bill Harris on omega-3s, and I'll link that into the show notes. But in short, my approach to optimizing omega-3s is a little more individualized than that. I would run an omega-3 index test, which does come with a cost, about $40 or $50. And you'll see where your baseline level's at. If you're someone that doesn't eat fish regularly, or you eat a plant-based diet, I bet it comes back at 4 to 5%. And that is because our ability to convert ALA, the short-chain omega-3 that's found in flaxseed and walnut and chia seeds, to DHA and EPA, these long-chain forms that are important for cardiovascular health and brain health, is relatively poor. And genetics will affect your rate of conversion to some degree. So some people will convert a little bit more than others. But generally speaking, if you're not eating fatty fish a few times a week, or you're not supplementing with omega-3s, DHA, EPA, then you're probably at 4 to 5%. So go and measure your omega-3 index with a company like Omega Quant. My experience is that most people can get their omega-3 index up to 8 to 12%, which is where you ideally want it. That's where large observational studies show that it is associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease. Most people can get up to that 8 to 12% with between 1 to 2 grams of EPA or DHA per day. For myself, it's more around that 1 to 1.2 grams of combined DHA and EPA per day, and that gets me to 8 to 12%. So I personally don't take 2 grams per day. I don't think more is necessarily better, and it's not cheap stuff. So if you go about in that way that I just described, that can help you determine what is the optimal dose for you. Again, go back and check out that episode I did with Dr. Bill Harris. I think it's a 30 or 40 minute episode, and it goes through exactly how you can optimize your DHA and EPA status. Next question is from Carmen. I started taking creatine and my kidney markers went out of whack. Why? Okay, this actually is not that uncommon, and it's almost always a false positive. Creatine gets broken down into creatinine, so not to be confused with each other, creatine and creatinine. You'll see creatinine on your blood test results, along with eGFR, which is a sort of an estimation of the filtration rate at your kidney. And that is calculated based off of creatinine levels. Now, in someone who is not supplementing with creatine, if you noticed elevated creatinine and lowering of this eGFR, that's a sign that they may have kidney damage. Essentially, it's a sign that the kidney is not doing a great job at filtering. But when you have this context of someone who is supplementing with creatine, you expect creatinine to go up, and it's not indicative of kidney damage. So if you go in and get a blood test and you've been supplementing with creatine, and you haven't told your doctor that you are supplementing with creatine, they could look at your results and see creatinine's elevated. And as a result, eGFR will be low because, again, creatinine is used in that estimation calculation. And they could think that you have an underlying kidney problem. But if they're a doctor who has done their research and understands the mechanisms here and what happens with creatine supplementation, then as soon as you tell them that you're supplementing with creatine, their concern should go away. Now, if you want to be really, really sure that you don't have kidney damage, you're someone that's supplementing with creatine, ask your doctor to order cystatin C. That's a more accurate blood biomarker indicative of kidney health, kidney damage. So if your creatinine is high and your eGFR is low because you're supplementing with creatine and you just want to be sure that you don't have any kidney damage, go and order cystatin C. And if that's in the normal range, then that suggests your kidneys are functioning perfectly fine and you don't need to worry about supplementing with creatine. And just to provide a little bit of extra reassurance here, I have a quote from a recent review on creatine that addressed the claims around kidney health. And I quote, "There appears to be an unsubstantiated perspective that if the kidneys are forced to excrete higher than normal levels of creatine or creatinine, some sort of kidney overload will take place, causing kidney damage and or renal dysfunction. In reality, transient increases in blood or urinary creatine or creatinine due to creatine supplementation are unlikely to reflect a decrease in kidney function. Additionally, one must exercise caution when using blood creatinine and estimated creatinine glomerular filtration rate in individuals who consume high meat intake or supplement with creatine." End quote. So hopefully that settles your nerves with regards to creatine supplementation and your kidney function. But again, if you are concerned, go back and see your doctor, order a cystatin C test and go from there. Okay, the next question is from Derek. And hi, Derek. I know who this one's from. How the heck did you get the card into Drew's back pocket? So for context here, if you don't understand what Derek is talking about, you're not following along here. In the last episode, which was a few weeks ago by the time this episode goes up, with Drew Harrisberg, at the end of the episode, I did a mediocre magic trick. I made a card appear in his back pocket. So go and check that episode out. And if you don't want to listen to any of the actual episode, just fast forward to the last 7 or 10 minutes and listen from there. You'll also get a little dad joke. And then let us know in the comments what you thought of that magic trick. But Derek, how did I get the card into Drew's back pocket? Well, a good mediocre magician never reveals his secrets, my friend. So all I can say is I don't exactly know how the card ended up in his pocket. It just happened. Just as much a mystery to me as it is to you. But perhaps when Drew's back on the show, we'll have to do another magic trick. He was pretty bamboozled and he still continues to message me, asking me to tell him exactly how I did it. But no can do, my friend. And just quickly, before we get to the next question, while this is top of mind, Mark asked before about ways to lower APOB without medicine. We spoke about viscous fiber or soluble fiber as one of the features of the portfolio diet. I just want to add that a really simple and tasty way to increase your soluble fiber is chia pudding. And I'm not sure if everyone realizes how simple this is. Like if there was a dummy's guide for eating more soluble fiber, this would be front and center. Literally take 3 or 4 tablespoons of chia seeds, dump those into a cup, add a cup of whatever milk you prefer. I like Ripple, which is a high protein pea-based milk that I get here in the States. If you can find a plant-based milk that's high protein, go for that. So 1 cup to about 3 or 4 tablespoons of chia seeds, put in the fridge. 5 minutes later, bring it out, just mix it up a bit, stops the clumping, and then put it back in. Leave it there for 6 hours or overnight. Now you have a breakfast that's high protein, it's high in fiber, particularly that soluble fiber that lowers LDL cholesterol, that you can add berries, mixed berries to some nuts and seeds. And that's a fantastic breakfast that will really help get you off to a great start with regards to your soluble or viscous fiber intake. Okay, next question is from Joey about aliens. This should be interesting. Thanks, Joey. If aliens landed and asked for a meal that perfectly represents the healthiest way to eat for both humans and the planet, what would you serve them? Gosh. I think I would have to refer them to the Eat Lancet Planetary Health diet. I think it would make sense to serve them something that allows you to speak about the state of agriculture on this planet. And we very much, and I've said this before, we've turned Earth into a farm. We're using way more land than we need to produce food because of the types of foods we're eating and the inefficiencies. that exists within our agricultural system. And as a result, we have massive destruction of these natural ecosystems. We have far too many greenhouse gases being released per calorie. We have ocean acidification, eutrophication problems, the list goes on and on and on. So I would feed them a meal that is representative or reflective of the Eat Lancet Planetary Health diet. And that is a diet that was put together by a committee of scientists working with the Lancet who set out to find the most appropriate way for 8+ billion people to eat in a way that would improve human health and also improve the health of the planet. And that's been validated in that they've looked at populations and looked at populations over time and looked at their adherence to this dietary pattern. So going back, so retrospective studies. And they've been able to see that higher adherence to the Eat Lancet Planetary Health diet is associated with massive reductions in chronic disease, also massive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and land use. And so I'll put that diet on screen for those who are watching, and also as a link in the show notes if you're listening. But at a high level, essentially half the plate is fruits or vegetables, about a quarter of the plate is whole grains. There's a small space for dairy foods and animal sourced protein and starchy vegetables. There's a slightly bigger chunk for plant-sourced protein, similar size of the plate for unsaturated plant oils, which could be nuts and seeds or plant oils themselves, and a very small slither for added sugars. And so if I was kind of putting something together for aliens as a set menu, then it would be a bowl where there was a base of whole grains like barley or quinoa. And then there would be a mix of colorful vegetables. So dark leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, carrots, sprouts, a scoop of legumes like lentils or chickpeas, some healthy fats. So avocado, nuts, seeds, and or olive oil. There would be some healthy sources of protein over and above the lentils and the chickpeas. So that might be fatty fish. It could be tofu, it could be tempeh if we're keeping it fully plant-based. And then a side of strawberries, some dark chocolate, and perhaps a cup of green tea. So that would be consistent with the Eat Lancet Planetary Health diet. And I would use that as a way of speaking to them about the way that we're farming and we're eating and the state of our health and the planet's health. I would be curious to ask them what they eat, and maybe they have some tips for us. Maybe we have some blind spots we can't see. So yeah, Joey, to answer your question, that would be the meal that I would serve to our alien friends that perfectly represents the healthiest way to eat for both humans and the planet. Another question from Natalie San. Thank you, Natalie San. Very active in the comment section on Instagram. Appreciate that. Do you believe in the biology of belief and that our mental state can impact our biology? Yes, I do. And I don't think that's a quackery position. I think it's well known and well described in the literature, and it's the reason we have randomized controlled trials. We know that the placebo effect is real. Often people think that the placebo effect is seen as negative, in that, you're telling people that it's in their head. The mind is very powerful, and it can affect our biology and our physiology and the outcomes that we get. And that's why when you see an anecdote online, one of our blind spots personally is that we have an experience in our life and, let's say we try something out, some type of new behavior, and we're told that it's going to help us with X, and we go and do it and it benefits it. It's very hard in our own experience, because it's not a controlled trial, to know how much of that experience was placebo versus the actual intervention itself, and or any of the other changes that maybe we accidentally made alongside it, which is why you need clinical trials so that you can try and tease out the independent effect of whatever the exposure or intervention is over and above placebo. So both groups think that they're getting something. So both groups get the placebo effect, but one group's actually getting it. So if there is a true effect of whatever they're getting above just believing you're getting something, then you should see it in the data. So yeah, to answer your question, I think the mind's powerful. I think it can impact our biology, it can impact our health, and that's one of the main arguments in favor of randomized controlled trials, even well-adjusted big population observational studies. And it's an argument against putting too much stock in anecdotes. And I would underscore that by saying that it's not that the person who is sharing their anecdote, quite often, could be, but quite often it's not that they have bad intentions, and it's not that they're making things up. They had their experience. I just think we're really limited in our ability to actually describe cause and effect in the changes that we make. And it's the limitations in the human brain and the blind spots and the biases that make the scientific method so necessary and so important. All right, we might finish up here on a light note. Alan, who may or may not be a previous guest, and his last name may or may not be Flanagan, says, how much would you pay to see Drew ski in his budgies? Well, you know what? Maybe if we set up a Patreon or some type of charity page and we raise a certain amount of funds for a good cause, we can get Drew skiing in his budgies. Or perhaps it's a podcast. Perhaps we can have Drew as a podcast guest on this show wearing budgies. And if we raise enough money and it is for a good cause, I will also wear budgies. And Alan, you know what? You asked the question. You can join us. So yeah, let us know in the comments if you would like to see us record an episode. Some site that would be in our budgies, and maybe we can work on finding a charity that we think is worth supporting, and together we can rally behind that. Alrighty, I think that's a wrap here, team. We did 20 plus questions. I enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I like just being able to take the question and share my thoughts on the fly. So as I said at the outset, take it easy on me, but I do hope you found some valuable nuggets within this and maybe a laugh or two. We did sneak a dad joke in there, which I'm quite happy about. Once again, thank you if you submitted questions. I have a lot, but I will continue each month on Instagram and on Twitter to ask you to submit more questions, and I'll try and keep these segments interesting by taking on new topics and angles and whatnot each time we do an Ask Me Anything. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I look forward to catching you next week. I knew that some of you would stick around. Probably you guys were the ones that were always getting called to the principal's office. My boss really hates it when I call him Dick, especially because his name's Steve. All right, get out of here. There you have it, friends. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did and want to stay up to date with future episodes, be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow on Apple or Spotify. Finally, thank you for showing up and the effort that you're making to take control of your health. I look forward to hanging out with you again in the next episode.